is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I do say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I got a very special guest for you guys, and I'm going to bring him up here in just a couple of minutes, but we're going to kick off the week strong with This Week in Freight, powered by my friends over at DAT. You guys, again, we do a 3 times a week lane analysis out there. It's just what I do personally inside of my operation to help read freight markets, because the rates are the rates at the end of the day, you guys. We need to be able to find those peak seasons. We need to be able to read those fluctuations to bring that stability into our customers' operations. And again, this is 100% viewers submitted. So if you want your lane broken down, email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com. I need shipping city, delivery city, trailer type, and that is it. And we're going to break it down. So today's lane is in my former backyard, my old stomping grounds where I grew up, Minneapolis, Minnesota, going down to Nashville, Tennessee. As we all know right now, you guys, rates are up. They're up exponentially in some lanes, but I also need you guys to understand that it's eventually, I don't want to say calm down, it's going to stabilize. And that's the thing that we're looking for more than not in a lot of these market fluctuations that we're seeing out here. So this is 882 miles. Again, that's the first thing I always pay attention to when I'm assessing any lane out there, because day of the week that it ships vastly affects the pricing that we're going to find on this lane. So with this one being 882 miles, it's great Monday through Wednesday. Thursday, if it has to ship Thursday for Monday, Friday for Monday, again, we're going to probably see a rate increase out there. Unless you get a driver who's from Nashville, from that area, heading back in that needs to get home for the weekend, you might see some rate reprieve on that. But a lot of you out there understand that right now, it's more about we need access to the truck, okay? And if you're a broker, that's our literal job at the end of the day. And so when we're out here and we're looking at this, we can see it's up about $400 year, in the 1 year mark out there. I think that it's going to be interesting to see when more and more data comes through here over the holiday weekend. And again, this is a holiday week, no matter what. We had Blitz week. Last week was a holiday week. This week's a holiday week. We're going to see rates up there. I think we need to be cautious on how we're pricing a lot of this. Now, like I always talk about, if you have a contracted rate in there with your customer, you got to find a way to make that work, unless they're going out there and finding a rebid or anything like that. But if you're in a spot market situation, you have to tether your customers' expectations more often than not about, hey, if we're quoting this today, Tuesday, to ship Thursday, things can fluctuate out there, okay? A lot of it is when you get that truck in hand rate, it might be that rate for the next 15 minutes. So if it's a load that has to ship out today, you got to apply a little bit of pressure to your guys' customers in these situations, because more often than not, if we don't lock in trucks for our customers' freight right now, it's going to go to something else. Okay, so we have to get that locked in. We have to put that expiration on our quotes, essentially like, hey, we can lock this truck in for the next 15 minutes, because when the dynamic has shifted to where there is one truck for 7 loads, that's when you start seeing rates get added up, because you never know what your competitors are struggling on if they've been sitting on this lane for a couple of days or whatnot. So when you're going out there, get that truck in hand, let your customer know. And this is going to be like on like a weekly basis with a lot of our customers now, because rates are fluctuating that much. And by fluctuating, I mean, they're continuing to rise out there. I think that today is going to be, potentially a rough day for a lot of shipments, because a lot of people, with it being the holiday, aren't going to want to get out on the road today. And if they do, they're going to want more miles than maybe this lane in particular has to be. But I look at this and I've said this last week, and I'm going to say this again, you guys, I think what we're seeing right now probably going to correlate into through the 4th of July. I think that is when we're going to have a very clear indicator on what is going to proceed for the back half of the year. I just think elevated rates are going to continue through the 4th of July. Again, I could be wrong. I always like to throw that out there. It's just I've seen stuff like this happen before, and we need to lock in that capacity as soon as possible and provide any and all options we can to our customer. Because if not, you guys, it's going to go to somebody else. Lock in that truck. Be decisive. Let your customers know, like, hey, what we're seeing, it could be through the 4th of July, because a lot of these holidays start to blend in over the summer months. But that is my kind of the way I'm reading this lane in particular here. And a lot of the lanes that I'm breaking down right now is get that truck locked in as soon as possible with your customers. And again, keep them up to date on everything that they're seeing out there, because their budgets are being blown out of the water right now as well. But that is This Week in Freight, powered by my friends over at DAT. And again, you want that lane broken down, email my team, podcast@thefreightcoach.com. Now, let's jump in with my guest. It's been a while since he's been on the show. He's recently started a new role, and I have my good friend, Mr. Jim Mullen, back on the show this morning. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thanks for the invite. And it has been a while. It's been over a year and a half, I'm thinking.
No, it has. And I mean, not only have you started a new role, there's about 85 different laws and regulations that have been put that affect things. But so how's everything been going over at the TCA here for these last couple of months?
Things are great. So I joined Truckload Carriers at the end of March, and then took over as president the first week of April. So it's going on 2 full months. And the timing obviously is interesting, with the surface reauthorization coming out from House Transportation Infrastructure Committee last week, and all the regulatory and enforcement goings on these days. It's never a dull moment, as you know.
Yeah, no, it really is. It's kind of tough to keep up now with a lot of this. And, I always look back at with where things are currently. I think, a lot of the individuals, a lot of the companies out there, and especially on the fleet side and the carrier side, they've been waiting for this for the last 4 years, right? Like, I don't know of anybody out there who could sit there with a straight face and say $1.40 a mile or $1.60 a mile is a sustainable rate per mile for some of these fleets. Now, some people can probably, make it out there, but like overall, I mean, the margins are very, very slim out there. And I think with a lot of what we're seeing, at least from like the enforcement crackdown from the FMCSA and the DOT, is it's welcome to all the carriers out there that are like, we've been doing this legal and by the books for forever. Cause like that was my ultimate thing, Jim. And I'd love to get your take on this, especially with your experience at the FMCSA, where it's like, I mean, at what point are we going to drive more of the legitimate providers out of the industry unless something like this continues to happen?
Yeah, without a doubt. The enforcement activity is extremely welcomed from the TCA members. And as you say, it's been a long time coming. And so we welcome that. Administrator Bars spoke at our annual convention the first week of March, and he gave a fantastic presentation. And if I remember right, he had a standing ovation. So yeah, that's been welcome. I mean, all you really need to do, Chris, even if you don't really know much about trucking, but you can look at the bankruptcies, second generation, sometimes third generation truckers going out of business. It's not like they woke up one day and, oh gosh, I forgot how to manage my network. And you look at the publicly traded companies, some of whom, were running ORs in the high 80s. Now they're running around high 90s, if not over 100 on some quarters. I mean, it's just been brutal out there for the last 3 years. And it's not just the trucking side. Now, as you're saying, the brokerage side, and then the increase in fuel spike. If you look, it's been tough. And I had a conversation with a gentleman who owns a farming and canning operation over the weekend, and he says they haul 150 loads on average, 150 loads a day. Mm-hmm. And he said his cost of transportation is up 24% year over year. And my suspicion is it would be higher, but for the fact he has such great leverage because he's running 150 loads a day, right? And I said to him, it's about time, right? It's about time, because if those rates had stayed stagnant for much longer, your capacity would have dwindled, and you'd have a hard time moving 150 loads a day.
Yeah, and I think like it's with that, it's also opening up the like how many of those people hauling your freight then are who they say they are, right? Like I think when times are tough out there, it forces some people, or it welcomes a lot of the bad actors out there who aren't like, they don't care at the end of the day, right? Like they have a mission. Their mission is to come in and make as much money as possible at everybody's, human expense out there on the road and stuff like that. And I think, like, to kind of pair that up with the recent Motus rollout as well. Like, I had the FMCSA on the show last week. I had Mr. Ken Riddle on the show to kind of break it down and talk about it. And, it's like from your perspective, are you seeing, and maybe, from your members as well, where it's like they want higher standards out there to operate because they feel like that's going to deter a lot of that bad behavior from the market?
Yeah. Yes. If you drive some of these bad actors out, which they are, I think I saw the latest count from FMCSA was 28,000 drivers for ELP violations. And that's obviously part of the reason why you're seeing the increase in rates. And what's going to happen is, well, not just that, but I assume we'll talk about the broker liability case that came down from the Supreme Court a couple weeks ago. All those factors putting together, I think, are going to be great opportunities for the motor carriers that do it right and the brokers that do it right. Quite candidly, I think they're both in that same boat. That in today's regulatory and legal environment, the cream of the crop is going to excel. And if the enforcement keeps up, and Administrator Barrs has been very clear, he's going to keep it up. You'll continue to see improvement, and not just on the safety regulations. There's a lot of issues with cabotage. And I think some folks may believe that that's a DOT issue. That's not a DOT issue. That's a Homeland Security issue, CBP issue. But they are now working together, DOT and security, to combat that. And I do know that the FMCSA has brought resources to bear on tracking some of those folks that are violating cabotage. And they're using outside resources to do that, not just internal resources. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that the industry became so depressed and deflated that it had to get to that point. But I think it has really woken up not just the regulators and Capitol Hill, but I mean, when you're seeing trucking stories on 60 Minutes, the CBS morning show on the weekend, you got a problem, right? You got a problem, and I think that kind of by and large, Chris, I'd say it's somewhat bipartisan. Some of the issues, there's still partisanship, but it's relatively bipartisan. The CORCA, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, that was bipartisan. So I think that everybody realizes that our industry has gone through some really tough times and needs some help, and folks are collaborating to make some improvements in the industry.
How so? I've obviously I interview a bunch of people on the show from all walks of the industry, and from your perspective, I mean, you've been in this industry a long time, Jim. How did it get to that point, right? Like, I think it's easy to now look at, like, it's great that the industry is getting all of this attention, but how do we stop this from happening again? Is kind of my big thing, because it's like, what led to this, and then how do we stop this moving forward?
Yeah, that is, yes. So at TCA, we're working on what I'm calling a thought paper on how to make sure we never end up in this position again. And it starts with Capitol Hill, and it starts with the regulators, and calling it the modernization of FMCSA. As you know, FMCSA was stood up in the year 2000, separated from federal highways. So it's been around 25 years, and the mission that it was mandated to pursue, there's been so many different changes in the industry that their resources have grown relatively incremental, not in commensurate with the resources necessary. So they need a lot more resources. I think you could double the number of investigators and still probably not have enough to do investigations. The money that goes out the door to the states on the MICSAP program, it's a lot of money. It's $600 million or so. So it's a lot of money, but we need to look at how those monies are being spent at the state level. I think the DOT needs to put in some more criteria, a little better supervision on how those dollars are spent at the state level to make sure they're spent efficiently. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement, both on the federal and the state level. But how did we get there? I kind of talk about this. So I was at the DOT FMCSA from 2018 to 2020, right? So I went in 2018 as chief counsel, and then took over as acting administrator about a year later. You know how many conversations I had about ELP? Maybe 2, maybe 3. It just wasn't that big of an issue. We were finalizing the ELDT rule, which had self-certification. And obviously, when I got there, the ELD was already in place, hadn't gone into effect, but it was within 2 months, self-certification. And then you have this huge influx of foreign actors. And I think we all know why that is, and no reason to get political, but I think we all know why that was. And you had this kind of perfect storm. And you mentioned earlier, they have one task only, those bad actors, that's to make money. But the thing about this group of bad actors is they're really smart. I mean, they to use a legitimate business term, they vertically integrated, right? So they make sure that the people are getting the CDLs when they probably ought not be through CDL mills. They're controlling the ELDs. As we all know in our industry that they're manipulated on the back end quite regularly now. And with the non-domiciled ELP, constant abuse of cabotage, all those things put together with a little bit of, I think that the DOT took their eye off the ball a bit between 2020 and 2024. And folks saw an opportunity to make a lot of money, and the bad actors have been making a lot of money. And we got to make sure that doesn't get to that position again. And modernizing the FMCSA is not the only tool, but it's one of the tools that we're going to have to implement.
Yeah, I look at a lot of what I see out there, and I think, like, as a society, Jim, we always like to treat the symptoms, right? Like, we always want to complain about the symptoms. We don't want to look at the root cause of things. And I don't care where anybody's born or where they come from. Like, that's irrelevant to the point. But when you have a gateway where people can come in illegally and obtain a CD, I'm not even going to call it a CDL. They obtain an identification that says they have a CDL illegally. Like, that's step 1 and step 2 of what we need to cut off, in my opinion, right? Because it's like we need to stop them from even getting behind the wheel at that point. And then when they're in the cab, you're talking about self-certification, ELD providers, and everything else. It's like, I'm the last guy that wants more government hands in stuff, but it's like, at what point are we going to be looking at, like, hey, if a carrier performs interstate commerce, it is no longer a state issue, it's a federal oversight at that point, to where it's like we have to have one set standard across the board to even get a CDL, right? Like, where, yeah, you have to get it at the state level, but it has to be certified through the feds at that point. It has to go to the FMCSA to show this. And again, I'm not saying I have the only way of going about this. I just look at it as we've made it very easy for people to get access to certain things, and then they're behind the wheel of the truck very quickly. And then if they're out there self-certifying their ELDs and everything else, like, what else aren't they doing? You know, then I guarantee they're not maintaining their trucks, right? I guarantee they're not performing pre and post-trip inspections on their trucks. So it's like, I think we got to maybe stop looking at, like, where we are and be like, all right, how do we cut off the supply of all of these people from coming in and even getting in behind the wheel of these of the trucks?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that the states are doing, and it wasn't just a red or blue state. As you know, there are some blue states. So I think it was a lack of focus, right? So that they were giving CDLs beyond the term of their lawful state. I mean, you know the drill. And so I think that there's a laser focus on that now, except for maybe one state, but they're laser focus on that. That's critical. The cleansing of the CDL schools that aren't doing it the proper way, that's critical. ELD crackdown, that's critical. All those things need to be working in conjunction. And, you know, so Administrator Bars, as you know, came from law enforcement. I mean, he's the right person at the right time. I say that all the time. I mean, it's very fortunate for our industry with somebody with that background and those connections on the state level, to be in the seat during that time. And so we got to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And funding again, when I was there, FMCSA's budget was about 670 million. About 60% went straight back to the states on formula grants. And now it's just under $1 billion. The percentage is about the same, but you look at how they're spending their money. Their number of investigators is pretty stagnant. I know they're trying to hire 40 more. I heard Bars say the other day he could handle well more than that. So I think the time is right for our industry to make the case to Congress that we really need to increase the budget because, right, if you let the bad actors in the door, it's really, really hard to get them out. So we need to have a more robust vetting system so that you don't just pay your, what is it, $350? I don't remember what it is right now, for registration fee, and yet you have a DOT number. There needs to be the vetting process. Yes, we have the new entrant safety program audit, but that's post facto. That's after you get your authority. You're already out there running, right? And I would say, I mean, it's a process. It's not the most robust process. So we need, I think, as our government, from Capitol Hill to the regulators, we need to give them sufficient tools so they can do their job. And I lived it for 2 years. Yes, there's waste. Yes, there's folks that aren't doing their work as well as they could or effectively as they should be. But nevertheless, the amount of money given to the FMCSA to fulfill the mission we all want them to fulfill is woefully inadequate. It's got to be fixed.
Mm-hmm. Is like when we're looking at a lot of, they're on the road and everything. Like you said, it's $350, and essentially you're running a business at that point. And how do we, because my thing is, Jim, no matter what, how do we highlight the people who are doing it right? Like that's the thing that I want more than anything, because it's like I've talked about on this show a lot here, where I think a lot of the situations that we're in right now, I look at it as it's a matter of national security. I truly feel that way. I think it is ripe for terrorism. I truly do. I just, again, I'm not like a history guru or anything like that, but I've read some books before, Jim. And what's the first thing people do? They cut off supply lines. They disrupt supply chains. They starve people out. And in modern times, it's like, why not take control of the supply chain at that point? And then there's state-sponsored terrorism that is going on, and that's what they're doing, right? Like they have published these things here over these last couple of years that a lot of these countries out there, it's a literal terrorist government that is infiltrated our supply chain. You're like, that is a massive problem, in my opinion. But it's like, again, ultimately, how do we highlight the carriers and the providers that are here right now that we know are doing it the right way, that are employing Americans? How do we highlight them to the point to where it's like, again, I think quality will always drown out the rest of that stuff, right? And if you have a quality provider in there, like you said, you're hanging out with your friend with 150 truckloads a day. They don't just move their freight on a whim, right? So it's like when they have a quality provider in the road, when they're in the door, they're going to continue to work with them. So it's like, how do we expand those operations and highlight those operations so they can fill more seats and their trucks with the right drivers? And again, I think that's what is going to be a major shift in drowning out a lot of this stuff. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, this guy, again, he's a not to say, but he's a farmer in South Carolina in a rural part of the state, and he knew the Montgomery case by name, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so that's a bad thing that he knows it, but it's a good thing in that he knows it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's good and bad. And to your point, we have to do a better job, and we all do. So TCA has a tremendous, safe driver of the year, safety professional of the year. ATA has it, tank truck here, but a little bit that's in a vacuum, as you know. I mean, talking amongst ourselves about how great we are is one thing, but getting that message across to the average consumer, if you will, that's a bigger challenge. And we do need to look, Chris, that's been one of our industry's challenges. I mean, I've been in the industry for over 20 some years. That's always been a thing. When COVID hit was the time in which you probably saw the greatest appreciation for truck drivers and the truck drivers doing it right and the companies that do it right. We got to find a way that we can get that message across when there isn't a international crisis in the supply chain. And I do think we're getting better at that. And I think you're starting to see greater collaboration amongst the stakeholders. I don't mean just the trucking association. I mean the brokers, the carriers, the shippers. I think you're seeing, well, I can just say for myself, I'm seeing more collaboration across the different sectors of the supply chain now than I've ever seen, with the exception of 6 to 12 months of COVID. Outside of that, this is by far the most collaboration and cooperation I've seen. And with the Supreme Court case on broker liability, here's my take on that, Chris. Do I think it was the earthquake in our supply chain that some folk know. Now, if it had gone the other way, absolutely. Because I remember one of the first cases when I went to Werner as general counsel back in 2005, one of the biggest cases that was thrown on my desk was a broker liability case. So it's been going on for a long time. Now, if the Supreme Court had preempted those state claims and said no more broker liability, now that would have been earth shattering. That would have been earth shattering. The effects on this, we're going to feel it, but it's not a quote game changer, at least in my humble opinion, in that respect. But again, I keep talking about each of these things individually are important, but collectively they're vital. The ELP, the non-domiciled, the schools, the ELDs, maybe a little more skin in the game on the broker side. Again, I say a little more. They've been in it, but it's just in certain jurisdictions they were granted that immunity for a bit of time. But all those things collectively, Chris, I think are really what's going to move the needle in the positive direction, both on safety, both on sustainability of the fleets, the whole thing. National security, which I do think is a part of the discussion that has not gotten the attention it needs, because I completely agree with you on that. And I do think that because of the crisis, that all those things have now come more into focus, and the government's working. They're being more collaborative for one another as well. When I was at DOT, we rarely talked to CDP, rarely talked to security. There wasn't that sort of collaboration. I know firsthand that they're doing it now. They're collaborating on the data that they're getting from these outside sources, vendors, if you will. So I applaud them for that. In typical government fashion, it's probably not moving as fast as it could or should, just because there's hoops they got to jump through in order to do some of those things they do to collaborate with private stakeholders. But the progress is being made, and the time in which it has been made, it's rather astonishing. And I think DOT needs to be commended for it. And again, they seem to be pedal to the floor and not letting up. That's great.
From a risk standpoint, because like with everything that came down in the Supreme Court case that I saw, I'm looking downstream a little bit. Is this going to cause shippers to now maybe stop working directly with fleets of a certain size just because they don't want to be held liable? Because I'm like, again, I don't want any driver or owner operator. I don't want death to the owner operator model or anything like that. But I can add, Jim, and if I'm like out here and I'm like, if I haven't vetted my current network lately, and then I vet my current network, and now I look at the Montgomery case and I'm like, wait a second, I'm technically going direct to this person. Is that almost going to cause a reliance from the shipper community on brokers who take on a lot of risk, or to carriers of a certain size that have more of a robust operating system? Do you see that could happen? Again, I don't know, but like if I'm looking at it from a risk mitigation standpoint, why would somebody want to be left with being drug into a nuclear verdict, right? Like we're talking 10, 20, 30, $100 million lawsuits. That puts out like 99% of the companies in this country out of business if that happens.
Yeah, I do think that is a possibility, and the owner operator folks, I know that they were advocating and wanted the outcome to be such as it was. And I get why they wanted that, but I do think there's some downside for them. I do think that shippers are going to gravitate, brokers are going to gravitate to those motor carriers that have more robust data sets so they can do the proper vetting, right? And one-man, two-man trucks, they don't have much data out there on their safety performance. And, I hope, in fact, that there are industry stakeholder discussions now about, could there be some sort of industry best practices or guidelines on this? I know TIA does their thing, but getting the more robust opinions from all the stakeholders, big carriers, small carriers, owner operators, law enforcement, and get those folks at the table to talk about, what are the criteria that folks hiring motor carriers should be looking at closely. And more importantly into that, what shouldn't you be paying any attention to? Like, you don't need to bother with this because this is not correlation to crash risk. It's just noise. Don't pay attention to that. So I do think there is some risk that the small carrier might feel the pinch. The other thing, though, I said it's not a game changer, but if you're a plaintiff's lawyer and you get a truck case and it was a broker load, if you don't sue the broker right now, I think you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, what easier way to get slapped with the malpractice suit is? And by the way, if I'm a plaintiff's lawyer, I wouldn't have any idea whether Mullen Brokerage has a vetting process. I wouldn't know. So what do? I sue them. I conduct discovery, I figure it out. And in some jurisdictions, they're going to let me do pretty thorough discovery on that. And now I've already, have $250,000 in defending the darn thing. I mean, that's real money if you times that by the number of cases that I think are going to come, have this broker liability component to it. Not that it wasn't already there, but I just think in light of the Supreme Court case, if I'm a plaintiff's lawyer and it's a broker load, I'm not sure how I don't bring a lawsuit against the broker. I would do it if I were a plaintiff's lawyer. So I think it's going to have some repercussions, and every time it costs money, that means you might see it at the grocery store or what have you. But I don't know how extensive that's going to play out, Chris, and I guess time will tell. But to kind of circle back to where we started, I think the folks that have been doing it right all along, and they'll rise to the top, and those that are willing to be diligent and spend the time, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. But you might see, unfortunately, some consequences for the smaller carrier that might cause them some pinch, and maybe even the smaller broker. I don't know. I mean, if the guy I told you about that's running 150 loads from his facility every day, he hires one of the largest brokers in the country. I think he'd be hard pressed to hire a broker that doesn't have that type of breadth and experience to broker that many loads as well. I mean, I just don't know that I would do it if I were him. I mean, there's certainly some security in that size of operation. So I agree. There's risk. And let's just hope, right? I mean, it's a lot of these things. One more gut punch could really tip the needle. We talked earlier about fuel price, right? Things seem to be looking up for us. Then fuel hit us right in the nose. But thankfully, the enforcement provisions were going on simultaneously, and so that kind of lessened the blow a little bit. But we really need to. I'm not telling the president of the United States what to do in Iran, Chris, but it sure would be nice to get that stuff behind us so the fuel prices normalize.
Now, I would agree with that, Jim. We need some sort of reprieve here, and I think most people in this industry and then just general consumers across the country are more looking for a reprieve in any way, shape, or form, because fuel is whether it's diesel fuel being up and that direct correlation that it has to shelves or prices on the shelves and stuff at the stores, like it's a very real thing. And I think it's a very big concern for a lot of Americans out there. But Jim, I appreciate your time. And this flew by. I hope to get you back on here again.
Love to, Chris. Yeah.
We always got a lot to talk about. But how does anybody reach out to the TCA to find out more about what you guys got going on out there?
We're truckload.org. We have our safety and security conference coming up in Oklahoma City in a couple of weeks. We have very robust registration for that. So we're excited to talk safety and security at our upcoming conference. We're looking to grow. So if anybody out there wants to become a member, reach out. Jim Mullen at truckload.org.
Perfect. Sounds great, Jim. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. And if you guys can't find Jim or the TCA out there, hit me up. I'll gladly put you guys in direct contact with them. But that is going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious, rank it on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang. Window down, yelling out money, anything. Hey, ooh, got the foot on the gas. Pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the bag. Hey.